Welcome to the AM Update, Week in Review. A collection of the best moments from Aaron McIntyre's morning update.
This is from Robert Malone's Substack, malone.news. On March 21st, 2025, the Science of Climate Change journal published a groundbreaking study using AI, specifically Grok 3, to debunk the man-made climate crisis narrative. The peer-reviewed study and literature review not only reassesses man's role in the climate change narrative, it also reveals a general trend to exaggerate global warming. Surprise, surprise. Furthermore, this paper demonstrates that using AI to critically review scientific data will soon become the standard in both the physical and medical sciences. After the debacle of man-made climate change and corruption of evidence-based medicine by Big Pharma, the use of AI in government-funded research will become normalized and standards will be developed for its use in peer-reviewed journals. So, what does this AI-created but peer-reviewed study say? Published in the Science of Climate Change, the paper, a critical reassessment of anthropogenic CO2 global warming hypothesis, suggests natural forces like solar activity and temperature cycles are the real culprits. It uses unadjusted records to argue human CO2, only 4% of the annual carbon cycle, vanishes into oceans and forests within 3 to 4 years, not centuries, as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change claims. During the 2020 COVID lockdowns, a 7% emissions drop, that's 2.4 billion tons of CO2, should have caused a noticeable dip in the Mauna Loa CO2 curve, yet no blip appeared, the paper says, hinting nature's dominance. So that is very interesting. Something, I think we might have talked about this at the time. We, meaning corporately on the right, might have talked about this at the time, that the lockdowns might be a poison pill for the global warming agenda. Because when everybody's home, guess what we're producing less of? Carbon. And so a lot less carbon when there's a global lockdown, which basically there was in the developed world. A global lockdown should mean a significant dent in what? Carbon. But we didn't see that. Didn't see it at all, according to this AI-created, peer-reviewed paper. Isn't that interesting? And now here's this. This is a mom in Fairfax County, Virginia, who I think speaks for us all in the next minute and 40 seconds. This is the dilemma that I fear so many parents have been put into over the last 5 years or so. She's speaking on behalf of her son, who's approaching preschool age. Listen to this.
Hi, I'm Kaylee Weichbrot. I'm a mom of 2 in Fairfax County. This is my oldest, and my husband and I have a difficult decision to make this fall as he is approaching preschool age, and we are faced with the decision of whether or not we are going to put our child in public school system where Fairfax County has decided to move forward with instituting gender studies in elementary school. Despite having done a study group, a focus group in the community to see if parents even wanted this. And when parents said no, the board voted 16-0 and said we're moving forward anyways. This shows clearly that they see parents not as partners, but as an obstacle for their agenda. And I have a really hard time looking at him and going, here, I'm just going to give you over to people who do not want to partner with me in how you're going to be raised. School and education is a huge part of a child's life. And early childhood is supposed to be filled with exploration and creativity and fun, not debating issues that are for adults to handle. These kinds of topics should be introduced sensitively and by parents who are raising their children with their values, not with an ideology passed down from the top.
That is so well said. And the only people who would dare disagree with that are demonically oppressed freak shows. And apparently, there are demonically oppressed freak shows in droves in Fairfax County. But I fear, and I know, that this is more widespread than just in Virginia. This is the dilemma that so many young parents face when it comes to their children's education. Most people just can't afford to send their children to a private school, even if it is a preschool of their choice. So they are caught in between a rock and a hard place if they can even afford homeschooling one way or another, or they just have to basically, as this mom said, give their children over to the public school system out of their control, who is openly hostile to those parents. That is so well said from that young mother in Virginia. And I pray that maybe for once, those words aren't falling on deaf ears. I think I have deaf ears now.
You're listening to the AM Update, Week in Review. Follow on X and Instagram at Real AM Update.
This is Nicole Shanahan, RFK Jr.'s running mate during his independent presidential bid. She was interviewed by Allie Beth Stuckey over at The Blaze and discusses more about her recent conversion to Christianity and baptism and what exactly happened that led her there.
Something happened to me last September, which I haven't really started to talk about, but I'll share with you. You know, Jacob and I, we got pregnant. I got pregnant on the campaign trail unexpectedly. And I was 20 weeks pregnant.
Wow.
And we were starting to taper down the campaign. And, but I wanted to go out there for mothers. And so I really wanted to I wanted to keep doing more, even though my body was kind of like, you got to slow down. But I was right at that very end. And then I had wrapped an interview actually with Megyn Kelly. And that was the day that I had my miscarriage. And it was pretty far along. It was really scary.
Yes. Wow.
I almost lost my life. Wow. And I was at Stanford. Actually, at 20 weeks, they take you to delivery. And so I went into delivery, and it was just not a good situation. Lost over 4 liters of blood. You only have 4 liters of blood, so I lost pretty much everything.
Oh my goodness.
And pretty much was dying. I was dying and was losing a baby. And it was a very scary experience. But at the same time, you know, I was taken so close to the end. And you could feel it. I could feel it, right? Like I could feel...
Like you could feel your life slipping from you?
Yeah. I had lost so much blood. And they were, you know, I waited till... I wanted to save the baby, so I waited to do the surgery. I didn't want to lose the baby. And so I was like, just wait, maybe it'll stop. So I waited, and I probably waited a little bit too long. And so then came the transfusion, and then, you know, the kind of rushing into the OR. And there's this moment where like, I actually had peace.
Yeah. Wow.
With this idea of going. And the chaplain came in, and, you know, you just don't know if you're going to come out of surgery.
Right.
So it was a moment of like, I want to live. I'm going to fight. Because I want to come back for my daughter, my 6-year-old. And I know she needs me. And God, if like you want to bring me back, I'm going to give it my all.
It's Nicole Shanahan. That is an amazing testimony. Revealing for the first time with Allie Beth Stuckey over at The Blaze that she suffered a miscarriage while on the campaign trail with RFK Jr. And it nearly cost her life as well. But that was the beginning of her conversion and recent baptism. And I just, again, trying to take my own advice here. You don't never want to launch new converts into the spotlight. You never want to throw cold water on them either. But I think highlighting stories, testimonies like that is really important, good, true, and beautiful. What an amazing, amazing story from Nicole Shanahan.
You're listening to the AM Update, Week in Review. Follow on X and Instagram at Real AM Update.
I've seen a version of this argument several times, and I don't know what's behind it, but several times. I saw it probably 10 different times and 10 different scenarios over the long weekend. And that goes something along these lines. I posted that just as a regular, everyday citizen, we should not have a welfare state. But if we're going to have one, I would prefer, just as a citizen, as a taxpayer, that my money go to funding or helping poor families buy something like a rotisserie chicken, which you can't purchase right now with SNAP benefits. Purchase a rotisserie chicken rather than being able to purchase pop, soda, whatever you want to call it. Okay? Well, aside from the fact I was called a lib for that by somebody else, another person responded and said, well, isn't the left going to use this to ban all meat for everyone when they get back into power? That was a good argument maybe 20 years ago. Maybe 20 years ago. In the year 2025, no. Has the left not shown us that they're going to weaponize literally anything and everything all the time? Did we not just see lefties use a specious application of the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act to throw Holocaust surviving grandmas in jail over the past few years? They're going to use everything and anything against us, regardless of whether or not we do it first. Now, when it comes to the issue of pop and maybe banning SNAP funds, welfare funds from being used to purchase soda, sugary drinks like that, the left didn't do that anyway. So that by definition isn't doing the same thing that they do, which was another part of this person's argument. But I've seen this all over the place. We can't do anything at all. We can't act affirmatively at all, because what if the left uses it against us? It's just, if you take that argument to its logical conclusion, it's just an excuse to do nothing at all because you're afraid of what the left might do that they're already going to do anyway, whether or not you do it or not. It just becomes an excuse to do nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the year 2025. No more being afraid of, what if the left does this to us? No, they're already going to do that. My favorite scene from Breaking Bad, and I'm not going to set everything up for you. If you've seen the series, you know what I'm talking about, is when Hank tells Walter White, Walt, you're the smartest guy I ever knew, and even you're too dumb to see that he made up his mind 10 minutes ago. That's what the left is. They made up their mind about what they're going to do to us 10 minutes ago. So regardless of what we do from here, we know their intentions. So dispense that thinking from your ecosystem, from your mind. I'm afraid of what the left will do to us if they use the premise that we set against us. They were already going to do that. Anyway, that's my 2 cents today. Now, this short story. Brad Wilcox, a professor at the University of Virginia and the lead of the National Marriage Project, was recently quoted in the Wall Street Journal on a story about how American women are giving up on marriage. Wilcox talks about the major demographic shifts that have put men and women on divergent paths. Wilcox is quoted as saying, quote, women are doing comparatively well when it comes to education and their early years in the labor force, and men are doing comparatively badly. That creates a mismatch because people prefer to date in terms of comparable education or income. Wilcox went on to cite the most recent stats in terms of happiness and women and which groups are most happy and which groups aren't. There is no group of women happier than married moms with children, and there is no group of women less happy than single, childless women. Courtesy of Brad Wilcox at the National Marriage Project, some data and quotes from a recent story in the Wall Street Journal. Again, our society for a generation has sold a lie to both sexes. The lie that it's sold, I think, to young men for way too long is this idea of arrested development, that you can just be Peter Pan for your entire life and you never really have to grow up. To the women, it's sold a message of you can be a wife, mother, and power broker in the corporate world. That's what true fulfillment looks like. And now it's created just a complete and total mismatch where women can't find men probably worthy of them because they have already engaged in their climbing the corporate ladder, and men can't find great jobs, and they're not attractive to the aforementioned women. That's just a witch's brew of dysfunction right there. And again, it's borne out through the data. The old magic is undefeated. The most happy women are married moms with children. The least happy women are single and childless. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis joined Laura Ingraham on Fox News and absolutely torched Congress for not even attempting to codify President Trump's executive actions into law. This might be the most important 2 minutes you'll hear all week.
And whatever they've done thus far, which has been intrusive, they will do more in the future. And so we know this just hasn't worked. Send the money to the states. Let us make the decisions.
Congress is going to ultimately have to take the step, yes, to really shut it down.
I think what President Trump can do is I think he can, from the inside, neuter the organization. But it will not be wiped off the statute books by an executive order. That has got to come from the Congress. First, let's give President Trump credit. We've been talking about for 40 years, Republicans.
Since I was at the Department of Education.
Getting rid of it, and it's never happened. This is the biggest step by far. But the congressmen all run saying you can't win a Republican primary in this country as a Republican saying you want to keep the Department of Education.
So it should be a no-brainer.
And so why aren't they voting to codify? But this is like so many other things President Trump's done. They're not codifying his immigration executive orders. They're not codifying these things. So while this is good policy in the instant, we want it to stand the test of time. Congress has to be the ones to do that.
Will they? Do you think?
If history is any judge, probably not. I mean, we're talking about the courts. The court's as good as anyone.
Limit the jurisdiction.
Congress can limit the jurisdiction of the courts. That is plain in the Constitution. It doesn't require 67 votes in the Senate. You can attach it to a CR. You can attach it to a must-pass bill. And here's the thing. If somehow you tried to do that and maybe it just didn't work, then I think our voters would at least understand. They're not even trying any of this stuff.
It's infuriating.
We knew these leftist judges were going to do what they're doing. Everybody predicted that. President Trump knew that. This was one where the Congress is basically, and what are they? They're on 2 weeks of vacation now. Really? That must be nice.
Yeah.
I think they got a lot of work to do.
Most of them are in your state of Florida vacationing. Governor, hey, great.
The most important 2 minutes you'll hear all week, because I'm still pretty much over the moon about what I'm seeing from the Trump administration. They're basically doing all they can in their control, executively, to enact his agenda. And by and large, most Republicans in Congress are enjoying the tailwinds that this administration still has, while doing absolutely nothing to ensure that those tailwinds remain permanent. Now, this was always going to be a problem. Really, we knew this from election night onwards. Such a slim majority in the House, yes. And maybe part of their plan is that first continuing resolution that you forced the Democrats to fold. So you set the precedent that, yes, they will fold with enough pressure. So the next time there's a continuing resolution, the next time there's a bill that you want to pass, you've already set the precedent that they will fold so you can get better bills through both chambers. It is a cesspool. Congress is broken, yes. But this is also a two-way street. I wonder soon if we will see the Trump administration and Donald Trump himself, if there's an appetite for a political fight with his own party, just to keep everybody on notice. We're not going to get some sort of wholesale change in the way Congress does business in 4 years. Heck, we might not even get that if we had the same situation, even slightly better situation for the next 14 years. We're not going to get Congress back to what it should be. But we've got to start somewhere, and that somewhere is baby steps. So good for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis just calling out pretty much the obvious there. Congress has to act. They have to step up to make these changes, Donald Trump's agenda, permanent. All right.
You're listening to the AM Update, Week in Review. Follow on X and Instagram at Real AM Update.
The NCAA's golden goose might just be cooked. The National Collegiate Athletic Association had about $1.38 billion in revenue for fiscal year 2024, with about $900 million of that coming from March Madness, the men's basketball tournament. So March Madness is their golden goose for the National Collegiate Athletic Association. This is what makes up much of their budget. And for all that's been made about college football and the changes to that, and yes, college football and football in general is king, when it comes to the NCAA, the tournament is king because they actually don't have any controlling interest other than certain academic and other regulatory kind of enforcement, which really have no teeth. They don't really have much to do with college football. That changed a long time ago. Not really the point of this conversation. Here's what's going on, though. The reason I would contend that the NCAA men's basketball tournament every year is so popular and worth nearly $1 billion in revenue, and sometimes it has eclipsed $1 billion in revenue each year. The reason it's so valuable because it has mass appeal. Mass appeal. If you're a fan like me, whose team didn't make the tournament this year, the Iowa Hawkeyes, you still want to turn in. Why? Because you want to see the drama, the Cinderella stories that always seemingly, until recently, we'll get to that in a little bit, these Cinderella stories, the drama, especially in the first 2 rounds, always make the tournament entertaining and always provide a payoff for invested viewers. Well, that value is on the decrease. At least I think so anyway. So here's the deal. Between 2014 to 2018, those are 5 seasons, 5 tournaments. Teams seeded 9th through 16, so the bottom of the bracket, achieved 43 victories over 5 tournaments, averaging 8.6 wins per year. 2019 through 2024, which is also 5 seasons because 2020, that tournament was canceled. Those same teams seeded 9 through 16 achieved 42 victories over 5 tournaments, averaging 8.4 wins per year. But that can't be right. That can't be right. I mean, this year seems so boring. So I did some checking. Those same teams seeded 9th through 16 this year. So far, we're in the Sweet 16, have 7 wins. Now, the only team seeded 9th or lower to actually make it to the Sweet 16 is Arkansas, but still, you're only a game below the average, or at least a game and a half below the average. See, I came in here thinking that the only memorable thing from the first couple of rounds of the NCAA tournament, Maryland's win notwithstanding, was an old Geico commercial from 15 years ago featuring an animatronic or CGI pig. Yeah, that is a great commercial, by the way. And I just thought, man, NIL really is finally starting to kill the National Collegiate Athletic Association's golden goose. But I don't think that's the case, at least not the numbers that I see anyway, because NIL really started to become a thing a few years ago. NIL is name, image, and likeness, where college athletes can be paid for their name, image, and likeness. What that actually means is that they can be bought. They can be bought by other universities, other athletic programs, essentially, through NIL programs. But so far, what I'm seeing from Cinderella stories, not that much different from 2014 to 2018, which was the era before NIL. It's not that much different from 2019 to 2024. This year seems anomalous because it doesn't seem like there's some St. Peter's or Loyola of Chicago that's making some deep run. We'll see what Arkansas does. But overall, on average, this is kind of just a slightly below average NCAA tournament. Sorry for the misdirection there, but I had to do some research on this because I was seeing a lot of takes like this and I agreed with them that it just seemed like, boy, this thing is cooked. This thing that we all loved, every single American loved, is just cooked. But at least when it comes to the drama, those lower seeds beating the high seeds, the David and Goliath stories, were only slightly below average. I asked you, is the NCAA tournament cooked? I gave you 3 options. No, that's an overreaction. The NCAA tournament is not cooked. The NCAA tournament is trending poorly. It's getting worse. It's a worse and worse product. And yes, the NCAA tournament is cooked, as well as your answers, which we'll get to in just a little bit. So of those 4 options, other comment below, that's 11%. In third place is yes, it is cooked. A quarter, 25% say yes, the NCAA men's basketball tournament is cooked. But in second place, 29%, no, it's an overreaction. And in first place, 34.8% say it's trending poorly. It's trending in the wrong direction. So what do you have to say? We'll begin with Frost, who says there were a few blowouts this year and only one buzzer beater. I don't know, NIL deals will work themselves out. They are still new. One pro would be that players will stay longer in college and develop more for the NBA. I don't agree with that at all. The NBA has their own developmental league, so the best players can go to that league if they want to. And nobody cares about the NBA anyway. Stu says, I think NIL is harmful, but we need to wait to see how it affects the tournament. Well, I think we already have enough data because NIL has been around for 2018, 2019 in that time frame. So we've had 5 or 6 tournaments now with NIL. Jeff Ely says, your point about having a very similar number of 9 to 16 seeds advancing is noted, but as conference changes have occurred, it's minimized the mid-majors more and more, such that now 10-seed Arkansas, with Calipari as its head coach, is the closest thing to Cinderella this year. Yawn. Now, Jeff, that's a great point, because something that was missing in my analysis is that part of the allure of the NCAA tournament is not just the upsets alone, it's by whom the upsets come from. A small mid-major or low-major school that nobody has heard of has a great team one season, and they go out and they beat a 2 or 3 seed. Nobody's heard about this school. It's kind of an anonymous David versus a very well-known Goliath. That's a big part of the allure. And your point is essentially that as NIL has basically coalesced all the best talent into the best leagues and the biggest leagues like Big Ten, SEC, instead of getting these upper crust, low major or mid-major schools that are springing these upsets that we might not have heard of before, it's now the Arkansas. It's now the middle of the pack of these big leagues. So, Jeff, you hit on something that I definitely missed, and that our version of a Cinderella is a John Calipari coached team. Holy cow. That's a good point. Suzanne HB said, I just noticed that Megyn Kelly is using AM Update for her 15-minute news brief. You had that named first. Yeah, I'm well aware. And so far, it's not helping me. So maybe I need to contact a lawyer and tell her to knock it off. Keith H says, all college revenue sports are kind of cooked. In a big picture, yes, you are right. Daniel says, it'll all be cooked if they continue to expand it. The play-in games, I know. I'm going to stop reading right there. They want to expand it to 70-plus teams, and it's just going to suck. But I think they're looking for those mid-major teams to come back here again, and that's where you would put them. If you expand it to 76 teams, I think is what I last saw. You know, there's more teams that you've never heard of that can have an opportunity, a quote-unquote opportunity in the tournament. Nope. Needs to be 64 teams, not 68, 64. Rob said, haven't cared or done a bracket since it was required in high school PE in 91. Priva says, don't care one iota. Michelle says, the what? Erica says, what's this NCAA tournament you speak of? S. David says, I don't watch any sports anymore. Okay, you've made your point. You don't care. I do. Some people do care, and that's who voted and commented, except for the people who cared so much who cared so much that they don't care that they commented, right? Do I have it straight now? That's going to do it for today. Back at it again tomorrow.
This has been the AM Update Week in Review. The AM Update will be back on Monday and every weekday at 4 a.m. Eastern Time.